In the world of gacha games, the line between a good deal and a bad one is always shifting. But every now and then, a single item is released that forces an entire community to stop and ask, what are we actually paying for? And recently in Wuthering Waves, that item was the signature weapon for the new character Augusta. This wasn't your typical case of a weapon being slightly underpowered. Its release sparked a huge debate that touched on everything: the game's excellent balance, the developer's design choices, and the very complicated relationship between a game and its paying players. It became a story about value, about comfort, and a community trying to define what it wants from a game it loves. And the catalyst for this entire story was one creator's very blunt assessment of a single premium item. When the content creator GachaSmack released his evaluation of Augusta's new signature weapon, he didn't just dislike it, he called it, quote, the worst investment he has ever made in Wuthering Waves. His frustration, however, stemmed from a deeper issue than the weapon just being weak. In his view, it was a fundamentally bad product. When the community started crunching the numbers, the data backed up his initial feelings. The weapon offered a tiny less than 10% damage increase over other much more accessible options, specifically the weapon introduced over a year ago, and that is GN's signature weapon. For a premium item that can cost $100 or more, that is not a small difference. It is a rounding error. You are paying the price of a brand new game for a performance boost you would probably never even notice. Beyond the stats, the weapon was just clunky. It felt bad to use. It was designed to be paired with her new gear set, the Crown of Valor, but the two parts didn't work well together. The weapon's main buff lasted for 7 seconds, while the Echo's buff only lasted for 4. It is like trying to drive a car where the gas pedal and the engine are completely out of sync. You end up constantly fighting for your own equipment just to make it do what it's supposed to do. And that is just anti-synergistic design, where parts that should work together actively work against each other. So you have a premium product with negligible performance gain that is also frustrating to use. It failed to make the character meaningfully stronger, nor did it make her more fun to play. From his perspective, it was a comprehensive failure of design. But to understand why this one weapon sparked such a huge debate, you have to look at the game it exists in, an ecosystem that until this point had been praised for getting almost everything right. And that is not an exaggeration. For the most part, Wuthering Waves has maintained a level of balance that is almost unheard of in this genre. The biggest issue in any gacha game is power creep, when new characters are so much stronger than the old ones that your previous investments become useless. This results in a treadmill where players have to keep spending, keep pulling the new characters just to keep up. GachaSmack himself contrasted this with games like Honkai Star Rail, which he pointed to as an example of where this kind of aggressive power creep can become a serious problem. In that game, for instance, new damage-dealing characters are often released with a significant vertical leap in power. The arrival of new units often set a completely new standard for damage, making launch-era characters feel noticeably weaker in comparison. Not to mention the endgame being tuned around the newer characters. It doesn't really help. It is a model that can make players feel like their old investments are becoming obsolete, pressuring them to pull for the new, stronger units just to keep up. But in Wuthering Waves, a full year after its launch has mostly avoided this. Characters from day one like Verena, Mrpokke, Sanhua are still considered top tier. They're often the best choice for the job, which respects the time and effort players have put in. The other side of that coin is a game's focus on skill. In Wuthering Waves, winning has always been more about learning the fights, dodging the attacks, and playing your characters well. Your wallet cannot dodge for you, and that is why some whales in the game still struggle with endgame content. This player-friendly system, however, leads to a central paradox. If the game is so well balanced that you don't need to spend money to beat it, then why would anyone ever buy a premium weapon? Also, by the way, if you enjoy videos like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Our goal is to reach 50K before the month ends, so any support you show is very greatly appreciated. What is the purpose of a $100 luxury item in an ecosystem that doesn't require it? To answer that question, you have to look at the community, which has already drawn its own lines in the sand. First, consider a weapon called the Stringless. This weapon is almost universally loved by the player base. The reason is simple. It offered incredible value through both its strengths and its flexibility. You can put it on almost any character of that weapon type and it would perform beautifully. It was a single investment that made your entire account better. A perfect example of a player-friendly item. And then there was Phrolova's signature weapon. The reaction was a complete opposite. Players were angry and they were worried. This weapon wasn't a minor upgrade over the free-to-play options. At its peak, it was a staggering 43% stronger than the free-to-play option. A gap that big wig isn't a luxury anymore, it is your mom's legs. It is a threat. It felt less like an optional upgrade and more like a mandatory component that you had to buy. This was the first time it truly seemed like the game's famous balance was at risk, the kind of aggressive power creep people had feared. This fear also extends beyond fairness, touching on the risk of the game becoming stale. The creator Brand Online made this exact point in a video about a different game, Genshin Impact, arguing that a lack of challenge for veteran players can make the entire gameplay loop feel empty. These two examples show a clear pattern. The community loves a weapon that is flexible and offers broad value, but it rejects one that creates a massive, almost insurmountable power gap. Players aren't asking for a signature weapon to be weak, they are asking for them to be balanced. A good choice, not the only choice. The community then has a clear idea of what it doesn't want: weapons on either extreme of the power scale. This makes the true nature of the original complaint even more interesting, because the core issue, as it turns out, was never really about the numbers. In a later conversation with another creator, Saintontas, GachaSmack clarified his position, and what he said reframes this entire debate. He said that when he pays for a signature weapon, what he's really looking for is comfort. The weapon should solve a problem for the player, not introduce a new one. He pointed to other weapons in the game that have simple, powerful effects that just work. You equip them, play the character normally, and you get the benefit without any extra homework. 𝗖•∗ weapon did the exact opposite. Instead of making her easier to play, it forced you into one single rigid rotation. If you deviated from that perfect sequence of moves even slightly, your performance would just fall off a cliff. It is not a comfort, it is a straitjacket. It locks you into one playstyle and punishes you for trying anything else. And this is where the economic argument comes in. He argued that some weapons in the game are flexible, you can use them on many different characters, giving them broad value. 𝗖•◗'s weapon is not like that. It is a niche weapon, meaning it is only really good for her. When an expensive item is only useful for one character, it absolutely has to deliver a massive spike in either performance or comfort to be worth that price. In fact, GachaSmack even offered an alternative to a pure power spike, stating that he would actively prefer aesthetic power creep, meaning he would be rather if the value came from the weapon being cosmetically superior and looking incredible, rather than just having bigger damage numbers. So when you put it all together, the weapon provides no significant power boost, it makes the character less comfortable to play, and it has no value outside of that one character. From that perspective, its entire value proposition completely collapses. This complex, multi-layered failure is what elevates a simple bad weapon into a much larger conversation. But before we get to that larger conversation, it is worth asking, if the creator's final point was this nuanced, why was the initial reaction so hostile? Was it a simple overreaction from the community? And the truth is, the confusion was perfectly valid. Remember the context, okay? The community had just pushed back against a weapon for being too strong, and then this new critique was about a weapon being too weak. The immediate logical assumption for many was that he was advocating for the very power creep they had just rejected. His most sophisticated points about comfort and flexibility didn't surface until much later, after opinions had already hardened, and then came to the second video, which escalated things dramatically. The discussion shifted from a product critique to broad personal insults aimed at the player base. And at that point, the backlash was no longer about a weapon, it was a predictable response to being attacked. So now, does that mean no one overreacted? Of course not. In the noise, the original valid critique of 𝗖•◗'s weapon as a poorly designed product got lost, and online discourse inevitably leads to a dog pile, where some will join in without the full story. But the situation was less of an unprompted overreaction and more of a perfect storm of mixed messaging, escalating rhetoric, and a community already sensitive to the topic at hand. This entire cycle of critique and confusion is what put the game and its developers at a critical crossroads. And in the end, that is what this was really about. The controversy around 𝗖•◗'s weapon was never just about one piece of gear. It was a stress test. It put the entire design philosophy of Wuthering Waves and its relationship with its community under a microscope. What that microscope revealed is the impossible balance that developers in this space have to strike, and the fundamental, often contradictory desires of a modern gacha audience. On one hand, players who spend real money want to feel like their investment was worth it. They want their purchase to feel impactful and rewarding. At the same time, the entire community, spenders included, fears anything that threatens the delicate balance that makes the game fair and fun for everyone. The community, therefore, ends up in this strange position where it critiques one weapon for being too weak and another for being too strong. They are asking developers to hit a target that is almost invisibly small. This leads to a deep contradiction that developers have to face. The most vocal parts of the community on social media will condemn the massive power gaps, but sales data across the industry often shows that the banners for these overpowered characters are the ones that are making the most money. This leaves developers with a difficult question. Do you listen to the vocal minority who advocates for game health, or do you cater to the silent majority whose spending habits rewards power? And that is the final takeaway here. The line between a satisfying luxury item and a game-breaking necessity is a razor-thin line. How Kuro Games responds to this feedback to this entire episode will likely define Wuthering Waves' identity for years to come. Will it continue to be the game that prioritizes that incredible player-friendly balance it was praised for? Or will it slowly start to slide towards the financial pressures that always demand for more power? The answer to that will shape the future of the game. And I'm curious of what you all think. Where do you draw that line? What to you is the ideal value of a premium item in a game like this? Let me know in the comments below, but that is all from me, 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗆, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!